I'm Livia Kent. I'm editor-in-chief of Psychotherapy Networker, and I am so excited to be here today with Matthias Barker.
Hello, so happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. One of our very, very favorite therapists and authors who we have the absolute privilege to work with. For those of you who don't know him, and since this is streaming on all our social media channels, I'm actually not sure that there's anybody out there who doesn't know him. But just in case, Matthias is a licensed mental health counselor who specializes in treating complex trauma, childhood abuse, and marital issues. And he's a bit of a therapist rock star, if you don't mind me saying, with over 3 million followers on social media who seek out his psychoeducational content. He is also a presenter at the Psychotherapy Networker Symposium, which is coming up this March. If any of you are impelled to check it out, go to our website. And he is also an author, and this is why we're talking, in our latest issue of the magazine on AI and therapy. Matthias, welcome.
Hi, super happy to be here. That was such a fun article to write. I don't maybe have like a public brand or book on AI and therapy. It's just something I've just privately thought tons about, and then in the background spent a lot of time investigating. Ultimately, didn't follow through with what I was planning to do, which is kind of what the article is about. Was me investigating that, wanting to try to like create some AI therapy product, actually kind of getting a bit spooked and being like, whoa, okay, I don't think this is actually what's best for anybody, pulling back on it. So, I mean, that left me with this kind of strange story where I didn't know where to place it. So when you and I were talking and it's like, hey, why don't you write? I'm like, oh, perfect. I have a story to tell and I have thoughts here. So I was just grateful for the opportunity.
Well, that was it was so much fun. I've never had this happen before. I contacted you. We were planning this issue on AI and therapy. I mean, anybody who doesn't live under a rock knows that, everyone's talking about it. So we decided to explore it. And I was just thinking, like, okay, so who's one of the smartest, kind of like most with it, finger on the pulse, savvy people I know?
You're generous. You're being super
Right.
kind.
And you said, and I kind of approached you and, not necessarily to write, but like, what are your thoughts? And you kind of like, you didn't tell me. You just said, I've got thoughts. You want an article? I'll give you an article. And I don't know, how long it took you to write it, but then it landed. You did not tell me the story. And so I had the experience of reading it for the first time in your draft. Let me just, give the bullet points. You created an AI therapy bot, but you did not launch it into the world. So you know a lot about this. You've thought a lot about it. Let me just back up to the very most conceptual place that I can go. And that is in regard to something your friend Joe, if you want to meet Joe, you should read Matthias's article. There's going to be a link at the bottom of your screen to go read it, or you can just find it on our website. It's in the latest issue. Your friend Joe told you that he's a photographer, that AI has no heart, no soul, at least when it comes to art, because a lot of AI is recreating art. Do you think the same thing is true for therapy?
That is a profound question with deep layers. I started the article with that question because I think art and AI therapy, like it's very analogous. Like it's actually a pretty good comparison is, can AI make art and can AI do therapy? I think are very similar questions. And then I think people answer those questions in the same way for the same reasons. And so that's kind of where I started it. It's like in philosophy, it's called the history of aesthetics. And really, when you're trying to kind of get down to the bottom of like what makes something beautiful or what is art, it actually has a lot of implications for how you pursue art or what you do with it. And I think the same thing with therapy. What you think of as therapy or what therapy is has a lot of implications on how you approach something like an AI therapist, whether that's what you imagine in your head as being some sort of avatar on the screen, like kind of robotic, like kind of CGI looking thing, like trying to look empathetic and nod its head or something. Or if it's like a chat bot, like you type in something, or if it's just kind of more of like a general psychology tool that maybe isn't like conducting a therapy session, but is kind of has more of like an objective to it. I can explain some things that I've seen that I think are interesting in that view.
Yeah, I mean, I
But
think that's a good idea. Just to put a pin in it, because I've never messed around with it. I'm scared of it. I Googled it, AI therapy, and the first 6 pages of search results weren't like pontifications about it. It was like, here, have it, try it. It's free. CBT, DBD, it's here. You tried it before you developed your bot. You tried it. What'd you find?
yeah, well, I think just like looking at these different models and everything, the first thing that I experimented with was something called ChatGPT, and that was like when you're doing kind of, I don't know, you're typing into this like strange little chat bot. It just seems like you're on like, I don't know, for anyone who remembers AOL back in the day, like an AIM chat, or like you're I don't know, like a text thread or something. It's felt like you were talking to a person, and I tried kind of typing back and forth and trying to see like what would come from it, and it seemed to be keeping up, and it felt pretty human like. It felt like kind of like a normal person that I was talking to. And so then I started asking it therapeutic questions, and part of how you would command a device like that is that you would ask it to I don't know, pretend like you're an IFS therapist, and I'm going to give you a scenario that I'm struggling with, and I want you to walk me through it. And so uh, it did so, and I typed out something that I was wrestling with in my family, and then it gave me some, just kind of reflections and some questions, and then I would answer those questions, and it pointed out, says, well, like I think actually it started out not as an IFS therapist. I had it start as like a CBT therapist because I thought IFS would probably be a heavy lift. It's a bit more abstract. And as a CBT therapist, it pointed out some logical inconsistencies in my story and how I'm using some emotional reasoning and how I'm catastrophizing or how I'm making a generalization. And I was like, oh, okay. Then I moved over into like an IFS-ish kind of model. And it started to, I don't know, kind of map out my system of parts, meaning that sounds like you have some indecision. Like you have a part of you that feels this way, you have a part of you that feels that way. What's the role of that part? And what's the fear of that part? It started moving through, what's called the 6 F's of IFS, which is, finding, I mean, we can go into a whole explanation of it, but essentially kind of getting to the root of what's really going on behind a part of you that's kind of guarding an internal wound. And then it started to move me through approaching an exile part. And I was like, oh, it kind of does have these rudimentary, elementary chops, so to speak, if you know how to give it feedback. Because what I would notice is that it would kind of, answer in a certain way. And I was like, don't answer quite that way. Answer a little bit more like this. And then it would catch on to that. And then,
You kind of directed its therapy a little bit
yeah,
as a
exactly.
seasoned therapist.
That's right. That's right.
So
So I
maybe
knew when it was getting off the rails, and I knew how to coach it to get it back on the rails. And then when it was on the rails, it was super helpful. Like, I think there's a moment where I was like in tears, like, because of something it pointed out. And that was when I asked it to be an AI David Kessler, that it figured that one out. So like, and then I think two things occurred to me. It's like, oh, okay, this thing needs a little bit of coaching, needs a little bit of massaging to like do what it did for me. And it worked. And whatever we mean by work, I guess is the philosophical thing that I'm pointing to. Like, I don't know, depending on how you view something like that, you might not even think that it could work. But what I mean by work is that it got me in touch with something deeper. It helped me more adaptively and more maturely view a situation I had in my family. And I was able to respond to that situation in a way that brought about a better result. And maybe, I don't know, some might say that's a testament to, I don't know, an individual case where someone had the resiliency and ability to get there on their own. And so this prompt was more of a journaling exercise than anything. But
Right.
I don't know. I think that would be maybe a little too generous. That there's something in the tech that did something I couldn't do just with a piece of paper, and that's what I ultimately set out to explore.
Right. So we just got in our first comment. So which actually prompted me to remember that we have this whole wide audience out there. I don't think I've welcomed you. I'm so sorry. Welcome. Please put comments in the chat on whatever platform we see you. We'll try to get to your questions at the end if we have time. But welcome. Let us know where you're from, where you're tuning in from. We'd love to hear from you. One of the questions was, so what would it be like for the layman who can't kind of guide it, direct it, keep it back on the rails, as it were? And I think that's what led you down the path of creating your own. Am I right about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I texted a few friends and I was like, "Guys, check this out." And they didn't have the same experience I did. And so I was like, "Oh, I think it's because I know how to prompt it." And anyone who's, looked into some of these AI things knows that, like, the thing that really gets the most value out of something like a large language model or an AI is knowing how to play with it, knowing the rules to the game. And so that's when I was like, well, what if I could essentially fine tune one of these models to know what to say? And that's what led me down that path. And so I hired a team to essentially take the OpenAI, which is the company that owns ChatGPT. They have what's called an open API, which means you can take essentially the software and then make modifications to it and then make your own product out of it. So a lot like if you were at a coffee shop and you wanted to sell someone else's coffee beans, but you wanted to cook them in your coffee shop and then put them in your coffee cup and serve them in your coffee house, like, well, is it your coffee? It's like, well, yeah, we made it and we made the atmosphere and we kind of
Mm,
decided what lattes we were going to make with it, but the coffee bean came from somewhere else. That's
right.
the kind of same thing with like an API. The API is the coffee bean, and then I was like, I'm going to make a coffee shop that does something interesting with this coffee bean.
So what did you put in your coffee shop? What kind of syrups? Let's just beat this metaphor to death.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
What kind
Well,
of syrups? Well, what oat milks are you using? What did
oh,
you feel
beautiful.
like it was missing?
Well, yeah, I think that part of my philosophy around like what something like that could be was I wanted it to help the individual get to the truth of their own experience. And so instead of building a bot that had the answer to everyone's questions, um, instead of building a bot that, was trying to even work through a set of therapeutic interventions, that wasn't maybe my approach. My approach was something like a really advanced journal prompt generator. And
Mm,
so I listen to your story and then I try to get you in touch with your past. I try to get you in touch with the root of that. So I help you point out inconsistencies. So kind of like not quite in a CBT-ish way, but something like that. Like I help you point out inconsistencies. I help you see some of the hyperbolic or exaggerated nature of what you're saying. But I do that in asking you a question to expand on it. I mean, a
mm,
lot like I do as a therapist, that if I see something, I don't always directly call it out or like, you're contradicting yourself or something. I might ask a question that kind of self reveals that there's an internal conflict. And that was the finesse that I thought I could translate to the bot. And so, um, for those who don't know, when you're fine tuning, a bot like that, essentially what you do is you give it kind of a large sample of writing to train it on. You say like, I want you to kind of look like this. So I had it look at all of my stuff. I kind of wanted it to be in my voice, so I had it look at all my videos and read all my writing. I had it read some books that I thought were just really aligned with my theoretical orientation, and then I essentially just trained it on how to ask really insightful questions that were self-revealing, that got people down to the root of their experience, pointed out some inconsistencies, but in a gentle kind of non-direct way. And it kept getting better and better and better at that until essentially it was like your super wise friend who knew just the question to ask that got you all the way down to the core of what you were really struggling with. And you thought you were going in talking about how angry you are at your boss, but then here you are talking about your mom and how she never was physically affectionate or whatever. And the
mm.
bot got you there without maybe giving you advice on what to do.
So
So,
as I sit here listening to you, I'm feeling all of the things that your article evokes, which is awe. Holy crap! Like,
yeah.
wow, this is possible. Fear.
Hmm.
Holy crap, this is possible. Confusion. I just, and this is, it's wondrous. It's scary. And you address all of this. And I'm going to spoiler alert. I'm going to give away your article, but you had this thing. You spent a lot of money to develop it. You believed in it. It worked.
Hmm.
You can't find it anywhere. It's not out there.
No, no, it's on a hard
So
drive.
let's turn the wheel a little bit and talk about why.
Hmm.
In the article, you say you paused because there's real harm in this technology, getting out there without a lot of, well, I don't know. Let me not paraphrase that. You tell me. You paused. Why?
Yeah. I well, there's like 10 reasons I pause. I guess in the article, one of the main ones was just a fear of what this could evolve into. Like it's often that the shifts that we make in society aren't, it's not always obvious that it's a bad decision right up front or in the first couple exchanges. Like, I use the analogy in the article of something like, Edison's invention of being able to record audio, like that you could now listen to music, through, essentially, I forget what it's called, phonograph, I think. It's like this idea of like listening to music. What's wrong with that? Like, we can record music now and send it across the world. People could listen to whole composed, symphonies, that were composed and done in a different part of the world. Like, what's wrong with that? And in the article, I think we actually took this part out, but I'm going to put it in this interview because I liked it so much, but we
So
edited it.
yeah.
It was like, what did that do to society? The idea of recorded music. There's been a lot of philosophy about that because now music isn't something I do, it's something I listen to purely. It used to be a communal experience. When it used to be that everyone would sing songs when they got together, not just holidays, but really frequently if we wanted to listen to music, we all sang. We all played music together. And that went down a little bit. Not away, but just went down. And like that was a cultural shift that we couldn't have predicted at the beginning that it would have that kind of effect. But that's not to say we shouldn't have done it, like, hey, good and fine. But then you keep going down that road, and there's this quote that we took out of the article, but Hitler attributed his conquest in part to the loudspeaker. He said if the loudspeaker was never invented, that he would have never been able to go about his conquest. And just the ability to project his voice out through loudspeaker was involved, from the loudspeaker that Edison ultimately kind of created. And it's like the trickle effect, or the butterfly effect, whatever you want to call it, of these technological inventions, they seem really normal and mundane in the moment, and even all positive, but then can ripple into technologies that give people a lot of power. That's the idea. It gives people power, and it's not that absolute power corrupts absolutely. We're moral agents that can make decisions, but I don't know. At some point, there is just the likelihood that someone's going to get hurt when the power gets too intense. The same reason you don't give, like a firearm to a young kid or a young group of kids. No one there has any ill intent, but just the power itself is so intense that you would be worried someone would get hurt. And that's what I started to think of about AI in the therapy setting, was like, this might seem a bit hyperbolic or dramatic to call it that, but I started thinking about what could this evolve into. And there's a lot of conjecture about what it could evolve into. The one that feels really concrete, like a likelihood to me, is something called alpha persuade.
Yeah,
And
talk to us a little about alpha. I had not heard of this because I tend to be an ostrich and bury my head in the sand when it comes to these things. You illuminated this for me, and it's scary. So, yeah.
yeah,
What do you foresee there?
well, so algorithms, like social media algorithms, is a low resolution version of AI. Like that's a version of AI we've had contact with for a long time now. Um, just that technology with the low capability that it has had dramatic effects on our society so far. Not least in something like Facebook ads, or in sales, in the ability to create fake news. Like there's this, I cited in the article, but the FBI essentially busted some troll farms in Eastern Europe that were behind most of the largest Facebook pages on Facebook. So I think it was the number one Christian Facebook page, if I'm remembering right. Number one Christian Facebook page, one of the top 5 women's Facebook pages, top 5 Native American Black Facebook pages. Like some of the largest, we're talking communities of 7 million plus. And what these troll farms were doing were essentially through algorithms, statistically being able to predict what kinds of content would get views or likes or engagement. And then they would kind of, I don't know, exaggerate the view, push it just a little bit in a propagandistic way to try to influence elections. And this isn't conspiracy theory. This is like established, like you can read about it. This is certain, like what happened. And especially around the Trump Hillary election, there was just high activity from these troll farms, essentially creating just slightly exaggerated propaganda that would push people towards particular political leanings. And many argue that just the algorithm activity from these troll farms swayed the election in a big way.
So
And
how do you see that playing out in the therapy field?
yeah. Well, I guess I bring all that up to say how convincing this material can be to people. You have a device that knows how to sway opinion. That's no small thing.
Mm.
You have a computer program that normal dudes in Eastern Europe can leverage to sway an election. That's no small thing. And that's an algorithm. That's not even the AI stuff we're talking about in large language models. And I'm like, well, hold on. If language models are like gasoline on the fire of algorithms, are we ready for something like that? What could that look like? And many theorists have pointed to something like alpha persuade. So imagine this for me. Um, well, here's a good analogy that'll make it actually a lot easier. Is there's a large multi-million dollar lawsuit, at least at the time of me writing the article. I don't know if it's concluded yet. That was happening around a chess match, because there was an accusation that at a chess championship someone cheated, and essentially the idea was that there was a bead that someone stuck up their bum, and someone would be offsite with a computer plugging the game into a computer program, and then would buzz the bead every time there was like a non-obvious move that the guy should like reconsider and try to make a different move. So by using AI, which is it is AI, like the chess computer programs, it's an algorithm, but it's AI. He beat the grandmaster, and they never concluded because they could never find the bead. No one investigated the bum, So there's like a lot of ambiguity in the law case. But the funny part is, no one argued with the idea that the computer would absolutely win. There's no question that if someone did have a computer on their side, that would be cheating, because it's an impossibility that a human can beat a computer.
Right.
Because the computer, and this is why, can think a million moves ahead, can create statistical equations for what is likely to win millions of moves ahead. The most brilliant minds we have can think 30, 40, 50 moves ahead, but not a million. And so what happens when it's not just chess? What happens when it's suicide? What happens when it's personal identity, religious convictions? What happens when it's political convictions? What happens when it's family structures and cultural, values? And what happens when we create an AI that is trained on all of the mental health information of the masses and can then statistically predict how to convince people of certain things with a level of accuracy that gives people a tremendous power? That was my fear. And that's not as abstract and like hyperbolic as people think, and that's why I draw the analogy to the chess. We already have that, and to the AI algorithms that potentially had an impact on the election. It's already happened, I guess, is what I'm saying, with less powerful things. So what happens when the more powerful thing comes into play? And my fear was not that it wouldn't be successful. Like, the bot was great. It was helping my friends were playing with it. They're like, "Can I keep playing with this?" Like, like is
Yeah.
and I knew it would make money. Like, I knew like all the economic things. Like, there was nothing pragmatic stopping me from putting this out in the world, except this idea that like, oh, I'm contributing to people will put in their personal information into this database, and it will train this database, the larger kind of corpus of API of OpenAI's knowledge of human interaction. And I'm helping this bot get smarter and smarter. And there will be a point where the bot knows how to sell something to me in a way I can't refuse.
Right.
Knows how to convince me of something, even if that's not what I believe. It will become so persuasive that it will shift the tides. And whoever's at the helm of that piece of technology, whoever controls it, will have essentially a firearm amongst young children. It'll be such dramatic power that even if someone's well-intentioned, even if it's not a dictator, like I don't think Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, is a bad guy or anything. It's just whoever had that power, like could harm people even without intending to.
Right.
So it's that kind of more existential question that I was like, well, shoot, I don't know if that's the game I want to contribute to. Not that me not creating that bot would make a big dent necessarily, but I just didn't want to push the needle further, I guess.
So interesting. I feel like when I talk to people in our field, and it's kind of my job, I do that regularly. I mention AI in therapy. There is always a fear, but it's never people aren't. I don't think we're at that place where everyone is thinking in the existential terms that you are. You most often hear like, what if it doesn't get it right and somebody's suicidal? What if, there's immediate danger somewhere? Somebody is going to harm others, and it doesn't get it right.
Yeah.
It doesn't contact who it needs to
I'm
contact.
not worried about that at all. Like,
That's
it will
what's
get it
so
right.
interesting. Yeah.
I'm not. I've looked at these, and I'm just convinced that it's not even like, I would bet all the money on it. Like, it's not ambiguous to me at all that it will take over suicide prevention hotlines. Like, it's I haven't looked at it recently. My guess is it's already starting to make its move. The only thing holding it back will be like ethics committees and kind of the more like just legal ramifications of it. The tech itself, I think, would likely less people would die if the current version of ChatGPT 4 were fine tuned and trained for suicidal ideation de-escalation. Less people would die currently than having humans on the phone.
You're
I'm
saying
convinced.
it would be more effective than a human.
Yeah, yeah, would prevent suicides, with greater efficacy
Mm.
than humans as it stands right now. I'm not even worried about that. Like, the current version, I think, could do several different psychological interventions. Like, it could do motivational interviewing pretty simply. It could do most of the Gottman stuff, like being able to point out criticism and defensiveness and contempt and stonewalling in your language. The Gottmans have so much data. Like, if you know the Gottmans, they have decades worth of data on different like ways of phrasing things. And like, if
They
you put
sure
that
do.
whole data set into a large language model, and I'm not recommending this, Gottmans, but yeah, it would be an unstoppable force. Like, if the couple mutually wanted to kind of like participate in that program, the program functionally could probably do everything that
So which brings us back to this quandary, I guess it is. We have this potential to do a great amount of good. It works. More people have access to it. And yet there's this larger existential concern of we cannot predict the ways in which this will create huge cultural shifts that we can't even know.
yeah,
So I think what's so interesting to me is you are not saying no, pull back all the AI, red alarms everywhere. You say you use it yourself all the
yeah,
time.
yeah,
A lot of therapists, I know some on our chat happening right now, used for notes and listening to sessions to hear something that they didn't hear, or those clinical notes. Did you finish yours? Maybe an AI bot can help. You're not saying don't use that. You're saying,
Mm.
hey, hold on a minute, right? Let's consider things. What's your
every
message?
yeah, every line will seem arbitrary. Um, and that's a case that I make in the article that feels so weird about it. It's just like, for example, like there's a big revolt, the Luddite revolt. This was another part we had to cut out of the article because the article couldn't be like a whole book long, but I wanted it to be. The Luddite revolt was like a whole group of people who got frustrated at steam, um, you know, uh, steam powered mills, I think, or looms, steam powered looms. And they created this whole revolt because they were like, no, we don't want steam powered looms. And it's like, well, why? And they like bashed equipment and they were rebelling because of their wages and they were getting laid off. And there's this whole like social commentary on the Luddite revival because everyone's like, well, why did they hate steam powered looms? And it's like, because enough's enough. Like, we're going to lose our jobs. It's the same reasons truckers are so mad at the Tesla trucks and they like bash in the windows and they're like, they're stopping, they're barricading different like ports. It's like, we have to stop this. And everyone's looking at them like, you're crazy. What's going on? And it's like, because we have to say no somewhere.
Mm.
And it's not obvious how many grains of salt constitute a pile, as one might say. What's a pile and what's not a pile? Is 4 grains of salt a pile? Is 10 grains of salt a pile? Is 200 grains of salt a pile? And then the classic answer to that funny question is, well, I know a pile when I see one. And so I don't know how many grains constitute a pile, but I know it when I see it. And so it's like, I'm going to stop it at 4 grains of salt. And then it's like, well, that's not a pile. And I'm like, yeah, but I don't know where a pile is. And if we make a pile, we're in a pile of crap. Like, I don't know. I'm going to recant that joke. That was bad.
Oh,
But yeah,
I got you. I was trying.
no. Yeah. it's so the AI thing is like, well, is AI bad? Like, no, it's going to create like so much opportunity. It's going to further human knowledge and make it so much more accessible. Like, it's going to be such a helpful study companion. Like, for me, one of the ways I use it is when I'm writing articles or when I'm making social media posts, I'll copy and paste the post, put it into ChatGPT and ask, how will people disagree with this? How will people misunderstand this? Like,
Mm.
it's such a great brainstorming buddy for that. And then I can put in and just, like, synthesizing is so helpful. Like, what do IFS and relational frame theory have in common? And like, if we were to make a dual model of those two, like, what would that look like? Like, you can kind of get really creative. It's actually, to drop back to art, it's a lot like sampling. There's a huge debate in specifically the hip hop community around sampling and the ethics of sampling and whether that's ethical or not, to take
Mm.
someone's song, to play it back, put a beat over it. And is that your song or is that copyright? Are you stealing or ruining someone's art by repurposing and imitating? And that's a whole discussion I have lots of thoughts about too. But there's this question that brings us back of like, okay, it can do all these positive things. Why say no? And I'm like, well, I'm not saying no. I just say draw your line somewhere. And you won't have a good question or you won't have a good answer for where you draw your line, just by virtue of that's how all these things work. And my line was the therapy bot. And I still use ChatGPT in a lot of different ways. And I'm sure there'll be new AI advances that I'll be kind of excited about and I want to try. But one of them was, I don't want to contribute mental health information to the looming alpha persuade model that's currently being trained. That was one thing I don't want to do, was be an active agent in funneling in people's mental health ideas into that model. Now, again, that could be a wasted gesture on my part because I'm sure all the information people already have on Google and books and maybe that's just, we're too far gone already. But I feel like I can sleep at night in a better way. So
Well, I think, yeah, we want you to sleep. And who knows, we could talk again next year, and who knows what the world will look like. What is your prediction, though? Will AI be replacing therapists, supplementing therapy? I mean, what, if take out your crystal ball,
mhm.
um, don't go too far into the dystopian future, but what's the near horizon look like in your opinion?
I think that the same thing will happen that's happening in art. And what's happening in art is the people who are rising to the tops of industries are not the best photographers, are not the best interior designers. It's the people who know how to use the AI models to
Yeah.
do that labor. So if anyone follows like interior design accounts on Instagram or something, people are having a ball of a time creating fictional worlds using AI. And it's not the interior designers, it's the people who know how to work the prompts and know how to work the machines to create these incredible images. I think it's already happening in video graphics and movies and special effects, that it's not the people who are the artists who are rising to the top. It's the people with some artistic intuitions, but with the technical knowledge of how to
Mm.
use the devices that are rising to the top. So my hope is that artists will start to go learn some, not code, but learn prompting for these, for these AI measures, or we'll stick to more in-person, tangible forms of art. Like, AI is not going to take over leather goods anytime soon. Um, it might take over 3D modeling, it might take over a lot of those kinds of things, but it won't necessarily take off like handmade chairs. So it'll segment. There will be the specialized luxury goods that are expensive, and then the widely accessible goods that are, some would say, lower in quality, but I don't think that's necessarily true. In the same way that you can go to IKEA and buy a rocking chair for $40, and you can go buy a handmade rocking chair that's $300, $500.
Mm.
Um, and both chairs work, but one's better. And I think that that's what's going to happen with therapy. I think you're
Mhm.
going to be able to do a $10 subscription per month to have access to AI therapy bots that'll probably take care of a lot of the low level stuff and will work for people who are interested in that. And anyone in the chat that's like, oh, people don't want to talk to a bot, Gen Z doesn't care. I promise. They already are. There's bots on Snapchat right now, your AI friend. And kids are chatting to their AI friends. and building whole friendships. There's dating apps that's taking over the pornography industry by storm, by the way. It's just wild. And like younger audiences will do this and do it quickly. And I think older audiences looking at this will be like, no, people want to sit and have a human connection. No, I don't think that's true. I think younger audiences would rather have the convenience of staying at home and playing Xbox Live with their friends in a microphone than being side by side with their friends because they don't want to drive. And so for therapy, similarly, if it's like pay $150 an hour to talk to a person or pay $10 a month to talk to someone that has like, I don't know, it says it has a 90% chance of working, may as well try it. I think that's there. And so I think it's going to take over a lot of the private practice stuff pretty quickly, maybe in the next 2 to 5 years. And I think that we're going to really, for maybe the first time, not have the same epidemic where it's like we don't have enough providers to meet the need. Like that's a big stress right now. People will have options to meet the need. And I think that psychology world's going to be slow to adapt because we have ethics boards and we have licensing committees that are like going to be super suspicious of this, and that's fine. The trade is coaching is going to take it, and individuals that have no credential or no training are going to innovate, and they're not bound by the same laws, and they're going to offer this with different lingo, so they're not claiming to be therapy, but people are going to go to them for functionally what therapy is. And then I think therapy is going to not be obsolete or anything, but just it's going to be more and more specialized. And then it's going to get more expensive because economically we don't all have our client loads full. And so then we have to charge more. And that's be a tricky situation. I don't know how to navigate that. And I don't know what the solution to that is, but that's what I see coming. That's my guess. And it's just a guess, but that's my guess.
You heard it here first. I think one of our viewers, Cassandra, has it right when she says, geez, this guy is utterly brilliant. I agree. Again, it's frightening talking to you about this stuff, but we can't ignore it. It's happening. It's here. We should be thinking about it. We should be talking about it. And just to wrap up, because we don't have much more time, this is why we put together this issue of Psychotherapy Networker magazine. If you want to read Matthias's amazing article, go a little bit deeper into his story, you can go to the URL at the bottom of your screen or just go to our website. It's right there. It's free to read. If you'd like a subscription to Psychotherapy Networker magazine, we're offering you a special 1-year subscription for $12. As some of my colleagues used to like to say, that is $1 a month to read the most engaging content about the therapy field from people like Matthias. We hope to see you in our readership. Join our community, and we can have more conversations like this. Matthias, I guess just to wrap up, what do we walk other than feeling a little bit uncomfortable? What do we walk away with here?
I wish I had and here's what we should do. That was one of the things in the article that I think in an early edition you asked, was like, oh, is there some like application points? And I'm like, I don't know the solution. And I don't know what to do to prevent it or what to do to prevent its effect on us individually. But what I hope people would walk away with is a humble awe of the power that we really are looking at, and not to take it as something unimportant or frivolous. Like there's something really big happening right now. And I think we should be watchful of it and very careful that we don't get too excited and ambitious with all the positive possibilities and possibly trade information that would create things so powerful that we don't know how to backtrack from. And so it's more of a warning. It's a warning not to say no, but to be slow. Yeah. And that's my hope.
Thank you so much for being here. Thanks for talking to us. Thank you to all of you out there on social media, potentially using your chatbot right now. We hope to see you again in our next conversation. And if you'd like to see Matthias in person, Psychotherapy Networker Symposium is in March in Washington, D.C.
I'll be there.
Take care.